Oh, well, hey, I was just about to get ready for youth and I just had to talk about this and go ahead and get a video out because I know there's already a lot of people who are talking about it. And so one of my passions, man, I love sports so much. And this actually hit one of my friends' sports group chats that we had. And I wanted to talk about it because there is a lot happening within this whole thing. It's a controversial thing. Christians are talking about it. Sports fans are talking about it. And I want to be able to give you my thoughts on this. We'll break it down. This might be a little bit of a longer video, but I've got some thoughts on it. And so let's go ahead and get started. So this is where everything really kicked off. It was a post by the Chicago Bulls on their social media that said the Chicago Bulls announced today that the team has waived guard Jaden Ivey due to conduct detrimental to the team. And people were like, okay, what does that mean? Because, that's not something that you see often. That's not something that you see a lot happening. And so what's the context that's detrimental? Now, we know from sports, like we just saw what happened with Tiger Woods. We know from other sports personalities and athletes just how detrimental their life could be. Look, even at the NBA with John Morant and gun charges and all these things that he has had, in his career. And so you just see a lot of crazy stuff. So you're like, all right, what exactly is going on here? And this is really what is happening here. So this was a video from
God did not make.
Jaden Ivey's live stream on his Instagram. And so this is like just a little bit of what he was doing on Instagram Live. Let's take a look.
A man to be with a man. How God did not make a girl to be with a girl. God made a man for the purpose of procreation, to have another child. How can a woman bear a child with a woman? How?
So apparently that's just a little bit of what he was going on Instagram Live for. It was like an hour or something like that he went live. And basically he's just kind of fleshing out his thoughts. Now, he has said that he is a new Christian, that he is surrendered his life to Jesus. And I think that's awesome. I think that's an incredible decision. It seems like he's had a past with a lot of trauma and a lot of really difficult things in his past. And so for him to make that decision is really cool. He's also been super bold about his faith. There was an interview that I'm not going to show you, but it did have somebody asking him about some slumps that he was in just on the court. And he was like, my identity really isn't in being a basketball player, saying Jesus and all this stuff. Is really kind of a cool way to see a basketball player, somebody who has a prominent platform, be able to proclaim Jesus. And there's a lot of athletes that do that. What he was doing here is he's basically explaining his stance on gay marriage or gay relationships, homosexual relationships. And he even goes into why the NBA is promoting that and, taking part in Pride Month and all of these different things. And so, it is an interesting kind of thing. And I'll give you my thoughts on that in just a second. I want to give you a little bit more information to just see the response that, pastors and church leaders and Christians kind of have. There's a guy that I really enjoy a lot of his content, but his name is Josh Howerton. He's a pastor at Lake Point Church, I believe. And anyway, so he said this on X. He said, many well-meaning pastors have an ick about engaging in culture war issues. Reminder, pastors are literally the only people in America who avoid these issues because they get to live in a tithe dollar created bubble. This is the important thing that I think is more applicable in this thing. He said, every one of your people faces these issues every day at work, with their families, in their schools, and many of them risk their jobs over them. They need clear teaching and consistent encouragement that no, they are not crazy. So I agree with a lot of what he's saying here, that pastors can sometimes be removed because, of course, we talk about these cultural issues, and of course, we go to the Bible, and of course, these are what people want to hear from us as leaders and as pastors and as Christians. But sometimes you can get caught in that bubble. There are people who work in secular environments that don't work for themselves, that are subjected to company policies and different things like that. And I believe that he is correct in that. I believe he's right that everybody is facing these issues at work, but I don't necessarily believe that this is simply a Christian issue. I think it's more of an issue of where is the line and where are the things that you feel convicted enough to talk about, and are you okay with the consequences coming? Because you're not working for yourself. You're working as a part of an organization. You're a part of something a little bit bigger. And if they see that as problematic, then they have the ability and have the right to cut ties like the Chicago Bulls did. Just like any employer would be able to do the same. Is it right? That's the different question. I don't think this is right. This seems to me like trying to silence anybody who believes that, there's a difference in thought or a difference in opinion here. And while I understand that companies, associations like the NBA, that kind of stuff, they have the right to do this stuff. But is it right? Is it the right thing? I don't believe so. I believe that you have to have a diversity of your thoughts and of, your positions and perspectives. Otherwise, you're just going to have the same type of person working in your company, being a part of your league, whatever the case may be. And that is ultimately problematic. I mean, as well as I do, that in Islam and, those who are of a Muslim belief, man, they are against the homosexuality too. I don't know that if a Muslim spoke out over this, that they would lose their job or their title or their role on a team or whatever. I don't know that would necessarily happen. It seems like there is a hesitancy with Christians being out front and all of this stuff. There's another aspect to this as well that I want to address, and that is, are you supposed to be processing everything that you are navigating as a Christian on Instagram? That's the other piece to this, that from the videos I've seen and from everything that I've seen from Jaden Ivey, it seems like he, as a new believer, as a new Christian, is processing a lot very publicly. And that can be problematic. I think of it in terms of, like, I'm a youth and young adults pastor. If I saw this from one of my youth or some of my students or some of my young adults, I would probably shoot them a text or give them a phone call and just let them know, hey, that's probably not the best place to process that stuff. Why? Because there, I believe, is a difference in standing for biblical values and biblical truths when you're pressed on it, or when you're asked about it, or when, the time comes to make those stands. There's a difference in that versus openly processing and openly trying to figure out your positions on these things or talk about these things kind of unprompted. I'm not saying that means that we back off of our faith by any means, but I do think that we have to be very intentional with the way that we engage these things. And I'm not saying back down. I'm not saying try to water things down, but I do think we have to be just a little bit more intentional with how we're processing, how we're thinking through these things, and how we're really seeking the Lord on this. Now, here's what I think is so interesting, going back to this clip of Jaden Ivey and what happened here. This is another aspect that I want to talk about, because, again, this is why I say Christians are not necessarily victims here, but we are targeted in just a different way here. And so what ended up happening was when Jaden Ivey got released, Travion Henderson, running back for the New England Patriots, my team, I love them, he posted a quote tweet with the Chicago Bulls press release that we saw, and he basically posted Matthew 5:10, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, he posted that because he himself is a Christian and a believer, and I would assume agrees with the position here, just like I would, actually. But here's what Mike Vrabel had to say at the coaches meeting.
Travion quoted some Bible verses supporting a Chicago Bulls player who got released for some comments that he made. And I just, how do you measure the line between conduct detrimental to the team, which is why the Bulls released the player in their view, and allowing a 23-year-old to, express his personal beliefs?
I think there is a fine line. I want to tell you, I love Travion. I love the person. He cares deeply about our team. He cares deeply about his faith. He cares deeply about his family. his wife, the people in our building. And so I want them to be able to express what they believe in their heart and in their mind.
You can already start to see where this thing is going. You can already kind of see that there's a big but coming up.
But also want to make sure that they're educated, and we want to be inclusive. We want to, everything we want to do wants to provide an environment for people to, one, feel comfortable, but also to share their personal beliefs. And then also we represent the team, and then we represent the organization.
So here's the issue that I take with Mike Vrabel on this, and this is what I do think is the problem with why Christians are kind of taking up offense over this. And this is where he said, man, I'm glad that he's able to do this. And like I said, there's a big but here. And I don't know why, but Mike Vrabel chose to go the route of, we want to make sure our people are educated. As if being a Christian and holding a biblical framework or biblical worldview is somehow uneducated. I'm not saying that every Christian knows every single thing about their faith, and sometimes they don't talk out of ignorance and those kind of things. I'm not saying that, of course, but that's the case for anything. What I think is the problem here is that he's equating, well, if he was more educated, then he wouldn't hold the position that he holds. And so it's my job as his leader, as his coach, to be able to make sure that we have an inclusive environment and that basically he gets on board. And so without drawing this too crazy or anything like that, how much longer until Travion Henderson is targeted in this thing? You know what I mean? Like, that's, to me, is very concerning, and honestly is super deprecating to any believer, because what Mike Vrabel is saying here is that, hey, if you were more educated, you probably wouldn't have the bigoted position that you have. And that's really not what is being communicated at all. Now, is it communicated in the best way? I don't know. I don't really know enough about Jaden Ivey or seen enough outside of just what, you've seen from social media and the news picking things up. But yeah, that to me just is not a good position to take here. And that's not something that I really agree with. And I think that is pointing to the fact that Christians do have a different treatment when it comes to some of these social issues and talking about this. I also wanted to bring up this, and this is a thing that's gone super viral. It's Emmanuel Ocho. It's kind of talking about some things, and a lot of people have been clipping this and reacting to it. And I'm going to do the same thing here because I think, again, this is another one of those takes where he makes some good points, and then he also makes some pretty crazy ones, especially when he gets around to the Bible. Let's take a look here. I'm actually going to go ahead and do the playback speed as like a 1.25 here. So let's take a look.
Freedom of speech, but freedom of speech does not necessarily mean freedom of consequence. I also will remind everybody, starting from the sports perspective, your talent will make room for you. If Jaden Ivey was averaging 20 points and 10 assists right now, 20 points and 10 boards right now, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. But because in January of 2025, he broke his left fibula, and then in October of 2025, he had arthroscopic knee surgery. And then again, he's missed the last 2 weeks he had missed, starting in February 21st after getting traded from the Detroit Pistons to the Chicago Bulls. As a result, averaging 11 points and 3 assists, his talent is not making room for him. Plus, if you're
So I actually would agree with this take. I think we see this a lot. And whether it's, in the NBA with athletes or whether it's, some corporate position, your talent does make room for you. There are people who perform very well who actually get to kind of cut corners in a little bit. Now, is that right? No, not at all. But that is a correct take that, yeah, if you were in a different position in the way that you perform, then of course people are going to let more slide, right? And when you're not performing, you have to be able to perform before you're able to take some of the stances that you take.
You're in the training room, we do not necessarily want to hear from you. We want to just see you recovering. So from a sports perspective, starting there, athletes, your talent makes room for you. The talent starts to diminish. We do not want to hear you more than we see you. That's number one. Yeah. Number two, I don't like the path that Jaden Ivey is going down. And the reason I say this is this. Number one, Jaden Ivey's been through a lot. If you hear what he's talked about, he was sexually molested as a child. He had a porn addiction while he was married. He's self-admitted that he was abusive towards his wife and his children. These are all Jaden Ivey's words, not my own.
See, it's interesting that he says these are Jaden Ivey's words, not my own, because from what I have seen, he said that he had abusive tendencies and abusive behavior. Now, he could be minimizing those things, but he never really explicitly said that he was abusing physically his wife or his children. And so when you look at that, you're like, okay, you're kind of conflating. Are you trying to get to your point, and that's what is going to be beneficial for you to make that? Like, I don't know, but I don't think that's quite as correct as he just kind of flies through and talks about.
And so Jaden Ivey is also acknowledging like he's a struggling individual, or an individual that has struggled. So let me acknowledge that, acknowledge the emotional and the interpersonal aspects as well. Anybody that's been to therapy understands things that happened to you as a child, they impact you as an adult. Now let me talk.
So he's going to talk about the Bible in just a second. But again, we're kind of equating, well, it's his struggles and it's his past, and that might be why he's running to faith, and that might be why he's saying the things he's saying. So if he was healthy, would he have these positions? Is again kind of the leading that Emmanuel Ocho is trying to go to. Now, here's where I really struggle with him when it comes to the Bible and what he's about to say here.
Talk about the biblical aspect of it.
Let's talk about it.
Because Jaden Ivey also has to understand that not everything that's legal is going to be biblical.
Not everything that's legal is going to be biblical. I would agree with that, actually. I would actually agree with that. If you've heard me talk about Christian nationalism or Christian progressivism kind of shaping politics in a way that makes it to where if you don't agree with this, then you're canceled or you're illegal or whatever. I don't subscribe to that, so I would actually agree with that. But here's what he's about to use to justify it.
To Caesar what is Caesar's. Also have to understand, you have to be wise, discerning, and tactful as to how you speak and when you speak and who you speak to.
Render to Caesar's what is Caesar's is not what this is really talking about. Like, that's really not what Jesus is trying to communicate there. If anything, Jesus is trying to communicate the ultimate authority of God. To render to Caesar what is Caesar's means that there is there's less authority by human authority, by man-made constructs of government and kingdoms and all this stuff, that God actually has the ultimate authority. If Caesar has your money, essentially what Jesus is saying is, if Caesar has your money, then God has your heart. So that really doesn't work here.
Jaden Ivey, if you want to quote Paul in Corinthians, Paul wrote what he wrote to the church in Corinth. He didn't necessarily write what he wrote to the church in Ephesus or the church in Galatia. In the same manner, Jaden Ivey, you got to use discernment of when you speak and who you're speaking to. If your job and your goal is to emulate Jesus, also understand when Jesus saw the woman.
Hold on. So he's about to reference the woman caught in adultery in Acts 8. But here he's saying, Paul wrote to the church in Corinth. He didn't write to the church in Ephesus. He didn't write to the church in Galatia. The problem with that is it seems like Emmanuel Ocho is trying to say, hey, Paul had a totally different set of things to talk about with the Corinthian church than he did with, the church in Ephesus or the church in Galatia. The problem with that is it makes it seem like, especially to somebody who might not know about scripture, that Paul is subscribing different theological perspectives to different situations, as if Paul doesn't have a consistent ethic or a consistent framework for what he is telling each individual church. Yes, each individual church had problems and issues, but no, it is not solved by different theological perspectives or positions. So that's not really applicable.
Who had committed adultery, he said, go and sin no more. He didn't then try to extrapolate every single sin and every single man she has slept with adulterously. So I will just start by saying, one, understand there's a difference between legal and biblical. Two, Jaden Ivey, make sure you tend to your mental and emotional health if indeed there is anything going on, because you have been very vulnerable about your struggles previously. And then three, render to Caesar what is Caesar's.
He uses it again. Like, no, dude, this is not what that text is talking about. This is not what Jesus is talking about here. That's not it. And so to use that again just shows that you're trying to use scripture and twist it in a way to get your point across, which I think is really bad. The last thing that I want to show you is actually from a reaction video that I've already seen from Ruslan, and shout out to Ruslan, man. Loved the Bless God video from the debate on the Trinity and some of those things. And honestly, Ruslan has been an inspiration for me kind of getting this channel started and the framework of like what I want to do with this. And so obviously I am a pastor. He's not, but I think like a lot of what we do, I very much look forward to him. That being said, I'm not trying to copy him by any means, but at the same time, I do think what he said about this situation is a very important perspective that we can have, and this is how we'll kind of close out the video. I know it's longer, but thanks for watching with me.
Within the Christian ethos, how hard you're willing to go against this issue, specifically on the homosexual issue is often a benchmark of your spiritual maturity. And the reality is that is one of many issues, and it is a different issue. When someone sexually sins, they're not just sinning against someone else, they're also sinning against their own body. Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians 7, your body's a temple. My concern here is that sometimes Christians will make this the North Star and how hard someone's willing to come down on this as the primary issue of which you measure somebody's spiritual maturity with. And I don't know Jaden's heart, but I do know that just several months ago, or not even months ago, several weeks ago, you had Magic City, which is a strip club in Atlanta, sponsoring a game, and we're going to have a Magic City night at an Atlanta basketball NBA game. And I do know that there was at least one NBA player that came out, had something to say. And D1, who is a friend of mine, Christian hip-hop artist, advocated for that to not happen and ended up having the sponsors not be Magic City, a strip club. My issue with this is if we're just willing to call that out with regards to homosexuality and Pride Month, but not willing to call out Magic City, which is substantially way more accepted within sports culture, strip club culture, is way more accepted within strip club culture, I would say as followers of Jesus, we have unjust scales.
So this is, and I'm not going to play the rest of the video. It's a little bit longer of a rant that he goes on, and I agree with him on it. And I do think that, again, it's bigger than just a homosexuality position. Our witness should be way more than just what do we stand on these hot button issues. And I get it. These are going to be the things that are talked about the most. But he's right, man. There was just a controversy not that long ago with Atlanta having a strip club sponsored and all this stuff. And there was almost no outrage from that. I mean, I'm sure there was, but like in context to what this is, we have to just make sure that we're consistent in what we're fighting for, what we're trying to believe for, all of those things. Because if we're not, then what we're going to end up looking like is we're going to look very hypocritical to people. And it really just damages the witness that we have. And that is ultimately what I think is the misstep here on Jaden's part. I'm not saying that I disagree with his positions. I'm not saying that I disagree with that. And I absolutely love the fact that he's turning to Jesus and he's bold about his faith. But we do have to be really careful with just making sure that we're consistent in our witness so that people can't look at that and go, well, you didn't have a problem with that. And like what Ruslan said, there are problems that are bigger at scale than these things. And so we have to just be really careful to it. I'm not saying water down your theology. I'm not saying be affirming or anything like that. But we do have to just make sure that we're aware of these things as we are walking this thing out. I know this was a little bit of a longer video, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this, man. What do you think about all the reactions and all the perspectives and all the people that are sharing this stuff? Let me know what you think in the comments. Should Jaden have been waived? Is it fair for him to speak out? Just let me know all of your thoughts, man. I would love to see what you have in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. God bless.